The people who are taking me around realize that I'm most interested in farm workers. And so I would photograph anyone that was there, but I would pay particular attention to the farm worker families. And then once we left the clinic, then the person I was with would take me either to the fields or to labor camp. And that's where the big switch would happen. In this particular camp, it is made up of found lumber, plywood. The roof is covered, it could be with cardboard, and then the cardboard is covered with sheets of plastic. But there's no one in the photograph because there were men there, and they said they didn't want their pictures taken because they weren't legal. And the whole encampment was built into the brush. They were very aware of helicopters, and they didn't want people flying over to be able to spot their camp because they really had to worry about being arrested and having their few meager possessions stolen or destroyed. I would say there might have been a dozen single men in this particular camp. And of course, I only found it because of the clinic outreach worker who knows where everybody is. Well, this is a great contrast photo because there's a man, I think he's from Mexico, and he's in a Catholic charity-produced camp for single men. It's a big dormitory, and this is a very good situation. These big, clean, covered room. There'll be showers, meals, and it's kind of an example of how the farm workers ought to be treated. And these facilities exist because of private citizen initiative. And in this case, of course, it's with the Catholic Church. So the only question would be, why are there not more places like this? Because they fill up quickly, and then there are no more beds. There's only so many men they can house at any given moment. But all of the people that I talked to were very happy about it, wish there were more. I was in Bakersfield, California. I stopped at the front porch of an elderly Hispanic woman, and I explained to her what I was doing. She was looking after the grandchildren. And so she immediately, her eyes got very bright, and she said, well, since you've worked with the United Farm Workers here, I have this photograph of myself with Cesar Chavez. So she's in the photograph, she's holding up a photograph of herself with Cesar Chavez in the center. And for a lot of farm workers, this is a defining moment, a real high point in their life to say that they were actually with Cesar Chavez at some point. Farm workers work until they can't work. There's no retirement for farm workers. But often the elderly people will look after the children while the parents are in the field, if they're able to. So the photograph at the Vista Clinic, we have a doctor, a dentist, and he has just spent about 30 minutes cleaning the teeth and getting x-rays on this very small girl, Amy. And when the little girl was getting ready to leave, then the doctor gave her the high five, and she immediately high-fived him right back. So it just went to show a good relationship and the level of caring and patient care and being friendly and all of those things that are just as important as the physical clinic and the medicine and all of the education that people could have. Being friendly is so important. This is Dr. Anita de la Vega. She's working with a girl, and she must have had an abdominal pain. She's feeling around on her abdomen to see if there's any sensitivity. She was, getting a general physical and had some kind of abdominal complaint. And Dr. De La Vega, again, she had a great manner and was able to put the little girl completely at ease. In this case, what I was drawn to this man at the Innis Packing Company. The workers had to carry their ladder, and they had to carry the ladder down rows of apricot bushes. It was interesting for me to watch the man walk carrying the ladder in the most efficient form that he could do it in, because it's at least a 10 if not a 12-foot ladder, so it's difficult to walk around with. In this picture, or in Collier, Florida, an audiologist, Paul Midney, is seeing a Haitian client. He understands the culture of the people he is working with, and he knows he has to be sensitive to the feelings people have about spiritual power. He's put his hand over the woman's ear and is transferring to her his healing power. He is a fine example of a person who cares about health in all of its aspects. I was walking around Immokalee. I noticed that there was a grotto for the Virgin Mary, and there was a man praying to the Virgin Mary. And that's such a big part of Latin American culture, the Virgin of Guadalupe. So even here in Florida, it played a very large part in people's lives. While I was in Florida to go to the clinics, there just happened to be a big demonstration. There's a single man holding a sign, "In sweatshops in the fields." In different parts of the country I've been to, the border fence is different, but the border fence in Yuma, Arizona, it's a long fence, and it's made of steel, and the gate is there because some of the owners of the land, this is still within the United States. This fence isn't really literally on the border. The fence is more than a mile from the border between the United States and Mexico. And so not only was it built with the idea of keeping people from Mexico from coming into the United States without passing through the regular border checkpoint, it also has fenced in American citizens and their property. And so there has to be a way for the farmers, ranchers, and people who live there to get in and out of this fence. And it gives you all kinds of odd feelings, like who's in prison, you know. But only another mile, the fence, it stops. It comes to a sudden dead end, and you can just walk around it. So all it does is make people go a little farther in one direction or another to get past it. The really bad part about it, though, is it forces people farther and farther away from water. So people crossing the desert are forced into ever more dangerous situations, and many people have died in the desert because of things like this. Also in Arizona, I went to a clinic, a very large clinic, and they were having health screenings, but people were still picking melons. And this older man wearing a old beat up straw hat, and he has a bandana around his forehead underneath it to catch the sweat, and another bandana neatly placed around his neck. He was very friendly and happy to be photographed and posed for me. I am always struck by the fact that there's no retirement for farm workers. You know, there's no security being built up for a farm worker. And so he looks to be in his 70s, but he's working as hard as anyone else. But he's full of presence. He has a great presence. And he's not beaten down at all. in this particular photograph, this older fellow is waiting to catch cantaloupe that's been thrown to him by a younger man, and then he in turn will toss it up to someone behind the conveyor belt, and it will go down the conveyor belt and be boxed up. But after a while, I noticed that it was difficult for this older man. I mean, he is definitely way into grandfather territory, and I could see that he was keeping up a brave face, but it was hard work, and he was feeling it, and I could see just how tired he was. And he'd have to get up and kneel down and pick up and toss these cantaloupes. And anytime he saw me, though, he would give me the big smile, as though it wasn't bothering him at all. But he had to keep up with these 25-year-old guys who were full of energy. He couldn't fall behind, and the machine never stops. These children were working on their homework on a picnic table on the edge of a labor camp in southwest Michigan. I also noticed a sign not 20 feet away from this picnic table that said, "Danger, peligro." This whole area has been sprayed with pesticides. What looks like a happy, carefree, innocent situation, it could be part of a life-threatening situation. The boy on the bicycle, he's very proud. He's leaning to one side with his hand on the seat of the little bicycle. This is his prized possession. It looks like the wall behind him is made out of asbestos shingles and is falling apart. This fellow in his 50s, and he has a large load, but I'm no botanist, and so I don't know what the plant is that he's carrying. But it's a very large amount of it on his shoulders, and he has his LA cap on. So this particular man, again, I was attracted to his face, the strength of his face, and his spirit, his friendliness. It just shows the intensity of the work, the difficulty of the work, but there he is, and he's doing it, and seems to be happy to be doing it. So, as in all of the photographs, it's just, is he being paid enough? Does he have the health care he needs? Does he have a living situation that's adequate? All of these other questions. But as far as being in the moment and doing the job and enjoying himself and his friends and his life, the man bending down picking lettuce is in the same general area of central New York. The soil is so rich that they were able to pick 4 separate crops. So this shows the continuing importance of hand labor. Sometimes if it's picked by machines, the machine does so much damage that you don't get another crop out of those roots. They can't rebuild the plant. Next to him is the one I call the Puebla farm worker. And I really liked her look, her expression. It's very resolute and inquisitive and sort of self-possessed. I noticed that sometimes people would work a full 8-hour shift picking onions, and then they would immediately go to the packing shed and work another 8-hour shift in the packing shed. I couldn't believe it. But in season, some of these packing sheds will run 24 hours a day, and they'll have 3 shifts of people. Because when it's time to pick, well, that's time to pick. And you have to pick them, you have to box them up or bag them, and then the next step might be to put them on a truck. The truck might have to be refrigerated, and so all of these things have to be done extremely efficiently. The growers, the small farmers in particular, are looking for laborers, farm laborers, and often the health outreach worker can make these connections. The health of the workers are very important to the farmers as well. So everyone trust the health outreach workers. And without them, I couldn't find these places. But if I'm with the health outreach worker, then that means I'm a good person, that I can be trusted automatically. So I'm totally beholden to the health outreach workers.